It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. My guest today is Gregg Florentin, CEO of TriCity Cardiology, based in Phoenix, Arizona. Gregg is a visionary leader in the healthcare field who has consistently driven innovation, operational excellence, and strategic collaborations in the sector. Gregg's leadership philosophy emphasizes transparency, rounding for authenticity, kindness, and collaboration. He firmly believes that prioritizing team members' overall happiness and satisfaction leads to positive outcomes for both the team and patients. Prior to TriCity, Gregg served as the president and CEO of Ahart Healthcare Solutions, based in Dubai and Houston, Texas. Under his leadership, Ahart grew to over 500 employees, where he was instrumental in holding various global interim executive leadership roles for 60 different specialties with mergers, acquisitions, joint ventures, private equity, and financial growth. Prior to that, Gregg also held various executive leadership roles with Willamette Group, Group Health, Providence Medical Care, and Meritus Healthcare. His career began at Community Tissue Services, one of the nation's premier organ and tissue banks. Gregg Florentin, welcome into the corner office.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Super to have you here. What part of the planet we find you at today?
I am in Arizona. Nice and cool today, you know?
Are you being facetious, or is it
I'm
actually?
being very facetious. Sometimes it feels like you're in living hell.
Has it gotten three figures already? Because I know you got that.
Yeah, we are. We're about 106 today.
Oh my gosh. Well, stay cool and drink plenty of fluids. But I know you didn't grow up there. I don't think you did anyway.
I did not. I do love this state. It's great. Can't miss the sunshine. I'll tell you that.
That's right. Well, let's always start at the beginning. Always like to talk about the earlier. So tell us where you did grow up and what your early family life was like.
Absolutely. Yeah, I grew up in Southern California. It's
Nice.
a small town. It's called Agora.
Yeah.
It's about a few miles east of Malibu. Most people are familiar with Westlake or Thousand Oaks. It was definitely the 70s where I grew up, where I feel like everything was shag carpets and bell bottoms, and I feel like it's an easy backdrop of vinyl records cackling. But my family was very close. We had our own vibe, so to speak. Very active in sports. All of us were playing a sport here and there. It's hard to believe back in the 70s we didn't have internet, smartphones, and all we were doing is playing Pong and everything, and captivated by whatever technology was going to come in the future.
Leave the house about 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night and be home for dinner.
Exactly. Hey, when the lights came on, that was the time to come home.
Brothers and sisters, Gregg?
Yep. I had one brother, one sister. And they were older than me. My brother was 5 years older than me, and then my sister was 7 years older than me.
Ah, you're the baby. Got it.
Yeah,
what did
I was
mom
the
and
baby. My father was a former computer programmer in the Air Force, and then he worked for a civilian technology company.
Nice.
I think it was that time during the huge introduction of the personal computer that definitely was something that he was interested in. And my mother, she was British, and she was a stay-at-home mom raising 3 kids.
Now, how did they meet? Did she immigrate over, or was dad in the Air Force?
Yeah, my dad was in the Air Force. I was born in Germany on a American military base, and so my father was over there and did some little jaunts over to England and met my mother, and they got
Convince
married.
her to move to California. I bet that wasn't too hard a message to deliver, right? Did she
No.
enjoy moving over in her 20s or whenever it was when she came
Yeah,
back?
yeah. Anyone coming from outside of the United States coming into America is a culture shock.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, but she took advantage of it. That's for sure.
Still have the accent, does she?
She does. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Tell us a little bit about kind of the influence and inspiration you had growing up. Anything that you recall back that mom and dad gave you in those early days back in Agora?
Yeah, my brother and sister took me under their wings. They were very much involved with everything. I usually went where they went.
Yeah.
My sister was a surfer, obviously, in
Oh,
California, being close to Malibu,
yeah.
and I dabbled that in a little bit, but the movie Jaws ruined that for me for the rest of my life. So that took
We're
me
going to
out of the
need a bigger boat.
Oh my gosh, that took me out of the water. I mean, to a point, I was even afraid to go into a lake. I don't know what I was watching as a kid. I felt like I was watching everything that was going to be a post traumatic stress disorder.
Uh,
So from there, I hung out with my brother, and he was all about baseball, soccer, tennis, you name it. So I tended to follow him everywhere. And then it came that time when I believe where California had that huge drought. That
right.
was the early 70s, mid 70s, and I think every neighborhood swimming pool was dried up and
Yeah,
left abandoned. And as we know, skateboarding took really an evolutionary leap at
that's
that
right.
moment.
That's right.
And my brother and I spent a lot of time boarding and kind of enjoying that, but bruises and practical broken bones. I broke my wrist, and my parents are like, no more skateboarding. So we circled back to baseball and soccer.
Was that back in the Super Surfer days and those old wood boards with the sawdust wheels, or
Yep,
was it a little more
yep.
advanced that
The
days?
Dog Days of Summer, that movie was a fine definition of what the 70s in California was all about.
Were you a good student in school, Greg?
Yeah, I was pretty good. I was most of the time I was really much playing into sports.
Yeah.
And, I did get in trouble a lot in school. I was very active, couldn't sit still, wanted to
Right.
talk a lot in class, impatient. I
Yeah.
think nowadays that would be considered a diagnosis
ADHD.
for ADD or even ADHD.
Right. Right.
But when I was little, I was the hyper kid. And ironically, when I got candy from my mom, quite often it actually calmed me. So
There you
there's
go.
the diagnosis of the ADHD right there,
Love
which
it.
is probably the reason why I'm addicted to candy today. But being a hyper kid, my favorite subject was PE, and I mean, come on, who who
There you
who
go.
wouldn't want to be hyper and having PE be their favorite subject?
Southern California, sunny every day. Gotta love it.
Yeah,
What were
exactly.
the sports? You mentioned baseball. What other sports did you play?
As a kid, mostly soccer and baseball. Dabbled a little bit in basketball, but soccer, that was my driving sport. I wanted to be a professional soccer player, and played with some of the top teams in California, which a lot of them ended up playing with the World Cup team and that. And I was on the Olympic development team as a
Wow.
youth, and that was my goal, was to
Yeah.
be a professional athlete.
Wow. Now, did you go on to and play in college? Did that come down the pike for you? Or
I
yeah.
did, but and then I did a little bit of a professional, but it was more of minor league. Never moved up the ladder. Never even stepped on the field, and that was my okay. I'm done.
Well, you got farther than most, that's for sure. I mean, that's
I
a
did
very cool.
semi-pro. That's what it
Mhm.
was, but that's as far as I got, and my backup was going to college, and that's the path I took.
What about entrepreneurial activities as a kid? Were you involved in any of that?
Oh yeah, mowing neighbors' lawns. I sometimes would sell, seashells that we picked up going to the beach, and collected a lot of things around the house to sell to the kids in the neighborhood. Sold punch, soda, even my own clothes one time that didn't fit me anymore. There was nothing like having cash and change on hand. It was very addicting. But I wasn't that type that said, "All right, I'm going to save this for a rainy day." It was got the cash. I'm going down to the store to buy. Guess what? Candy.
Candies. God, I was going to ask you. So any of that get saved, or was it all just straight consumption?
My parents were really diligent and said, you need to set aside 10% and, hold
Really?
on to it, or,
Yeah.
give it to my mom and she'll hold it for safekeeping. And,
Right.
that was kind of the driver of things sometimes. But there are a lot of times I'm like, Mom, I really need that other 10%. I really need it. She's like, what for? I was like, well,
Or
she's
candy.
like, yeah, she's like, you're not going to buy candy, are you? And you can imagine in a
Oh,
British accent how that's coming across. And
yeah.
she's like, no, you're not going to have it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And what about W-2 jobs? Did you do any, retail or anything like that? Getting into high school and junior high?
Yeah, in high school, I worked for Domino's and I worked
Okay.
for the local movie theater. I mean, nothing better than getting free
Oh
pizzas
my
and
God.
free
Yeah.
movies.
Movies.
So
Wow.
I
That
would
was
work Domino's for maybe twice a month, or not twice a month, twice a week, and then the movie theater on the weekends. My brother worked there, so he got me the job. And
nice.
when I couldn't drive, he would drive me, and so that was great. And then there was times when I would work with the Parks and Recreation with my father, and so that was a great opportunity to kind of dabble in that a bit.
Was it kind of a foregone conclusion you'd go to college? Did, older brother and sister do that and was it expected of you? Or was that kind of an option that, a path you chose to go down?
My parents were very, very strict, but
Mm.
they also knew that the decision I made, or for any of my siblings, was our own.
Mm.
So any consequences, we had to take ownership. So
Yeah.
was it clear? Yes and no, because my initial plan, as I mentioned, was to be a professional soccer player.
Right.
And unfortunately, when my parents got divorced, it set me back a little bit off track. And so
Mm.
I moved out of California, went up to Seattle with my mother, and soccer wasn't the same up there, but obviously college played, and then did a little bit of that semi pro. And my brain just went back to, I got to go to college. And it's interesting because my mom was just saying, you need to start making a decision in your life, because she pictured me just saying you're going to be flipping burgers for the rest of your life. And
Mm.
that was kind of I don't want to be flipping burgers. That's not for me. So I went to college.
And you went to Utah, which is interesting. Tell us about that choice.
Yes, University of Utah. So, I'm of the LDS faith, and
Okay.
one of the things I did want to go was to BYU, but at that time I wanted to go into medicine. So they kind of rejected me on there and saying that we really don't offer that. So I'm totally against BYU now because of the rejection. But I went to University of Utah instead, which is perfect for a rivalry.
Yeah.
And I was a student athletic trainer there my first 2 years, and it progressed to wanting to go to med school to be an orthopedic surgeon. And I did go to med school for a little bit, but I did not like it. I just felt like it did not fit, but I loved healthcare. And so it
Yeah.
took me into a different direction.
Interaction. And you went on to get your MBA a little bit later. Now, did you do that following your attempt at med school, or was there a little bit of work in between?
No, there was a little work in between. It was actually an MHA, so it's a Master in Health Administration.
Got it.
So, I was a transplant coordinator when I first got out of college with my bachelor's, and I was removing heart valves and tissues for my first 4 years,
Wow.
non-MD kind of
Cool.
required skills. So I really loved this role. It
Yeah.
got me
So
truly
hold on. So were
exposed.
you
Yeah,
actually in the surgery then when you?
yeah, yeah. So as
Wow.
a
Wow.
transplant or a tissue coordinator, anything that's not consented for live organs, right? Liver, you know, kidneys, any of the organs. Um, After usually those were removed, then the family consented to their tissues. That would be their bone, the veins,
Huh.
even skin grafts. And so we would come in and take care of those. If they didn't take the heart, we'd be able to remove the heart valves and then be able to get those taken care of, and those get transplanted into those who might have some
Harvested
poor,
from
yeah, some
something.
might
Yeah.
heart defects. Yeah,
Awesome. Cool. And so you were
yeah.
like in your 20s when you're doing that. That's what,
Yeah, yeah, I
yeah.
was in my mid 20s, and I love the role. Like I said, I was in the hospitals, and it taught me the medical
Yeah.
opportunities to teach the medical staff about organ and tissue donation and how to approach families for consent.
Right.
It was a great, rewarding career. It's both
Yeah.
emotionally sad, but also emotionally satisfying. One minute you're talking to people who've lost their loved ones, but
Mm.
then you turn around, you're talking to people who've have their loved ones survive because
Living
of these
life.
great gifts of people being able to
What a
consent.
terrific thing. Well, just deep dive a little bit on that. Tell us what, would you say were kind of some of the key learnings you took away from those first jobs in that area?
Oh, sympathy.
Yeah.
Approaching families to ask them to donate organs or tissues it's difficult. As I always say, if you're uncomfortable doing it, it means you haven't done it enough. And the first few
I like
times it's traumatizing, right? You get
that.
people who are upset, but then others are like, no, we knew that's what they wanted. This is what we want to do. It makes something good come out of a very bad situation. And you have a true appreciation of the human body and
Yeah.
and what it can do, and
Yeah.
how people can find something tragic and sad, but something to come out of it positive. And when you see these families get together when
Oh,
there's that opportunity, oh, it's amazing.
man.
There's not a dry
Breaks
eye
my
in the
heart.
house.
I know. I love that. So back then, it probably wasn't as prevalent as it is today with like heart health directives, right? People usually now are asked when they do their state plans and so forth. So these were typically folks that would not have had a health directive that you would have to say, hey, would you mind, if you could loan this, or how did that work? Or do you still have to go to people that had health directives as well?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
Even with the health directive, you still had to get that consent from the family. Even if they put on their driver's license that they wanted to be a donor, that you still needed to get that consent because, you have it on your driver's license, but they may have changed their mind.
Sure. Yeah.
And just because they have it on there, didn't mean anything. But nowadays with the directives, they go on to the UNOS website and they can choose to have it on or off whenever they choose. And
Absolutely.
now that's the directive.
Yeah. God, what a cool job. And so you were not only interfacing, obviously, with the people on both sides, but also you were in the surgery as well. I mean, right? You did some of the stuff when you were transferring the organs from one place to another, or
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. There were times. So with the organization, we worked with the transplant physicians, and we'd fly out together. And when they were done, then we would come in and do our part. And so it was definitely interesting to be able to get back on the plane and carry the cooler that is the
Yeah.
cliche out there, and knowing
Yeah.
that we're getting ready to go into another hospital and be able to transplant it.
Cool, cool. Well, I know you're a three-peat CEO, and we're going to get to, your most recent, before we get to the end of the podcast at TriCity Cardiology, right? I think that's where you are
Correct.
today.
Yep.
But before then, tell us a little bit about how you progressed in management. So did you get into leadership positions pretty quickly following that job, and kind of progress that? Did you jump around a little bit? Give us kind of that early career.
Yeah, yeah. So, while doing the organ and tissue transplant industry, there's opportunities that we do for rounding, right? You got to go to the hospital, you talk to the nurses, and then you got to talk to the C-suite just to make sure they've got updates on UNOS requirements and anything that is mandated. And so I would talk with the CEOs and COOs about their roles, which was the
Mm,
reason why I chose to get my master's in health administration. They
yeah.
they talked about opportunities, and I would just ask randomly, what do you like about your role? What don't you like? And I remember a CEO I chatted with when I was telling him that I was interested in maybe going into leadership. And he asked me, he goes, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to do hospitals? Do you want to do profit? Do you want to do nonprofit? Do you want to do
Mm,
large? Do you want to do small? Do you want to do government? He just went down the whole list, and my
wow.
brain just exploded, right? The stimuli was
Yeah,
just,
I don't
whew,
know.
it was sticking. I
Yeah,
mean, the synapses were firing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know it was
so
this
many opportunities.
complex.
Yeah.
And so I dug in a little deeper, and I said, I don't know, but I want to do it. And he said, you need to get your master's,
Mm,
either an MBA or health administration, and you'll get an idea, and you'll start out in a position that you'll move up in the ladder. And I said, well,
mhm,
I'm going to do it. Talk to my
yeah.
wife. She goes, absolutely, go for it. And when I finished with my master's, I got my first position as a director, and that was interesting.
So
I
that was the
was
that was the first time you started managing and leading people then. Yeah.
Yeah, I,
Yeah.
I got my master's, and all of a sudden it felt like instead of doing a low end job, I went straight into a leadership position. But I hadn't even been a leader
Wow.
before.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing this by the seat of my pants.
Probably
And
with a lot of people that are even older than you, right? And more experienced.
yeah, well, most people, right? They do their externship, they get to follow a C-suite person, they get to kind of be mentored a little bit. I wasn't. It was just throw him into the fire and see if he even survives. That's
Yeah.
how I
Yeah.
felt.
Right.
And becoming the boss was a huge career transition, and it came with a lot of new responsibilities. And making this transition to being a first-time manager took time,
Sure.
patience, practice. I was now part of something bigger than myself,
Right.
and my success was no longer dependent on my own work, but on the work delivered by the people I either had to coach, mentor, or delegate to.
Yeah. Yeah. Big change. What if you think back to those early leadership days? What were some of those things that you remember most about, the experience coming out of that?
Oh, I felt like I needed to have all the answers. That's,
Mm,
when you're looking around at other leaders, they just seem to be so knowledgeable
yeah.
that it's just my eyes would be wide and like, wow, that person is so smart and so knowledgeable. I need to be that way. And I felt like I needed to save face, right? I just needed to come across like I knew what I was doing because I
Yeah.
felt like I would get that credibility, that honor and earning that, oh yeah, he's a leader because he knows what he's doing. But
Right.
that was not it. I thought that would rise up the ladder faster, but how quickly that realization was off track and not the answer definitely was a life altering moment for me.
So kind of relying on others and figuring out what they know and, being maybe a little more humble. Was that kind of part of it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's the positives and the negatives of the lessons you learn from previous bosses, right?
Yeah.
I started to watch, and I felt like those bosses that I watched led with an iron fist, and
Right.
they seemed to be successful, well
Yeah.
accomplished. So I felt like I needed to follow that motto for a brief
Mhm.
moment, and I realized that was not it. I cannot do that because I saw the lack of respect others gave. Sure, it got things done in fear, but eventually they would leave the company and it was demoralizing and very costly. So I
Yeah.
said, that is not what I want to do. So I
Yeah.
wanted to change and I wanted to be the opposite. And a boss that I eventually worked with, who I truly admired, led me to the path that I'm on today, who saw I was off track and he shared with me many anecdotes, but he
Mm.
shared a pretty popular one that probably a lot of people have heard, and I have it actually posted up on my board here. He said, on your last day, Greg, on earth, the person that you become, or at least the person that you became, will meet the person you could have become. And
Mm.
if you want to be a great leader, you need to be a great listener. And he continued, and he said, you're going to win and you're going to lose as a leader, but the goal is to win more and lose less.
Love that. I love that. What was it that Michael Jordan said, when complimented on all of his scores and all his accolades? He says, yeah, well, I've missed a heck of a lot more.
Absolutely. I mean, and that was a deep thought because I said, you know what? Do I want to become this mean leader? And I know we see it in industries and it works in some places,
Mm,
but in different cultures and different, industries and different environments, you have to learn to pivot from it. You have to learn to adapt and know what's going to work and what's not going to work.
right, right. Well, you took on your first CEO position about 10 years ago, I think, right? Was that
Yep.
with
Well, a
Ahart?
little bit longer than that. Yeah.
Okay, got it. And did you kind of rise up through the ladder through that organization? Tell us kind of how that
No,
kind
I
of
went straight into the CEO
yeah,
position.
recruited into
By
it.
that time, I had a lot of leadership styles that had evolved over time, and so that was a great opportunity to be able to take everything that I've learned in my past, everything that worked, didn't work, and kind of took my own personality per se into a direction that I felt was getting the most out of the employees.
Yeah, yeah. And you've moved around a little bit. It looks like some time in California, Texas. I see Dubai in your background, Michigan. Was that kind of part of your advancement, that flexibility to be able to move and take on new opportunities?
It was, and some of those positions were either a contracted position or a temporary while they were looking to hire a CEO.
Yeah,
So, with the organization that I was working with in Dubai, after I was there in Abu Dhabi working with a government hospital system, they had an opportunity for someone like myself to start up their healthcare pillars. And so I took on that role, and there were a lot of opportunities for me to go in and consult and do some strategies, look at coming out of COVID, getting some opportunities to be able to help maintain the culture, look at the strategies, work with the staff, and kind of help with service excellence and everything else, and really guiding and inspiring a lot of the soft skills that I had into one situation and then using hard skills for another. So I was there to kind of right size it, get them onto the right path, hire the right people, and then I was done and then would go on to my next task.
Awesome. Great. You mentioned earlier that you had a mentor or two along the way. And sometimes we've had tormentors in our background. And sometimes some of those worst lessons, without mentioning any names, can be also very specific and help us along the way. Can you cite maybe one or two of things that you either saw behaviorally or maybe had, a bad boss that you learned things from and said, "Boy, I'm never going to do that." And what were those and how did that kind of form your leadership style?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like I said earlier, there are leaders that I just saw were not probably a people person, and that's where I think I've learned the most is how to connect with people. And you know, pounding your fists on the table to get things done never felt like that was the right answer. And so when I started to talk with people, one of the biggest things I like to do is I like to round. And it's my opportunity to speak with individuals, listen to their value added input, opportunity to lead with conviction and involve everyone in my vision and strategies. And I needed to do that when I was in these contracts because
Yeah.
I needed to know, hey, what's working, not working, and then carry kind of these different hats because the world is pretty much shrinking and time is moving so fast and you don't have time to focus on just one thing. So you have to anticipate even the most unimaginable issues and make plans to overcome any obstacle. Consider any new and engaging ways to communicate and connect. And I felt like I could not lead by doing the same thing in every situation, as each situation is very distinct. And so I listened. I would pivot, I would lead, and I would listen again
Mm.
because of those organizations that I was able to hop from in those contracts and being in the interim roles, I had to make quick decisions, but I couldn't make decisions without understanding what is going on with everyone. What is everyone's issues? What didn't work before with a previous CEO? What did work? And I kind of mold it like clay into, okay, let's get rid of that kind of culture. And there's that big saying out there, right? Don't change a culture. And I said, you know what? You're right. We're not going to change it. We're going to realign it. And so you have to use these key buzzwords with staff because you tell them change, they start to panic, right? They start to go, oh my gosh, how's that going to impact my life? How's it going to impact my family? How's it going to impact my job? And so when I would tell them we're going to realign the culture and get their value added input, it got buy in
Mm.
and it made them realize, oh my gosh, I have a say in the direction that we want to go because I see things weren't working before. And this CEO is coming in to ask, what could I do better? What could I be involved with? And I would be able to identify individuals to be my champion, my leader to gauge other staff, other departments. And we would do SWOT analysis, which you're familiar with the strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we would come together, come up with some of the solutions and give it back to them to make them go, hey, if we want to have these opportunities turn into strengths, it starts with you. But
Mm.
I, as the CEO, will support you in making that change. And I will kind of guide us and mold us into the right direction. And in the end, retention is maintained, satisfaction is maintained, and it benefits the organization as a whole in the end.
Gotta love that. And I love the fact that you start with listening. Two ears, one mouth, right? There's
Hmm.
so much to be learned from people, and particularly people that have been a long time in an organization that, frankly, so often haven't had the opportunity to really be heard. And
Right.
they know a lot. I love that. So, TriCity Cardiology has enjoyed you now for getting close to a year and a half. Tell us a
Year and
little
a
bit
half.
about what attracted you to that opportunity and making the move to Arizona.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had my youngest son was still in high school, so I was still traveling around to all the different states and different projects. And my wife and I had the discussion that when our youngest would graduate from high school, we were going to settle on a long-term permanent position where we could feel like we can contribute to the community, I can contribute to the organization, and then of course not be done with a contract and then leave and then wondering, gosh, are they still doing well? I feel like I gave up one of my babies to
Mm.
someone else to take over.
Yeah.
And so once my youngest graduated, my wife and I, we talked about several places that we wanted to go. We either stayed in California, go to Utah, Texas, California, and Florida. And so those, just as you can see, most of them are warm states, right? Or
Yes.
at least sunny. And it was an opportunity for us to kind of do some interviews, and we had interviews in three of those places, and we visited all the locations. But I felt Tri-City had the growth that I was looking for. It had the opportunities that I was looking for, the opportunities for my wife that she was looking for. She was working for Google at the time in
Mm.
California, so this was going to be a hard change for her because she loved Google. I mean, who wouldn't? And so she wanted to make sure this was going to be a win-win. And we've been to we've been through California many a times, and the culture's changing there quite a bit. But Arizona, we came to visit, and we really liked it. We've been here before. We've got family, but the fit was the biggest. The
Yeah.
culture seemed to fit what I was looking for, and it was a win-win situation. And I turned down the other two positions to take this.
Love it. How do you go about building a successful workplace culture at Tri-City?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the biggest things that I have really looked at is, what I call the three criteria. There's patient satisfaction, employee satisfaction, and revenue. And not one of them is more important than the other. And
Mm.
that's what I learned in the past, right? It's the iron fist. Revenue, revenue, revenue. If we don't have the revenue, then no one has jobs. But I didn't agree with that, Brant.
Mm.
I thought that was a false negative. I thought it was a complete oxymoron to what we're trying to achieve as leaders. Because if there's no revenue, yeah, there's no staff and no patients. But if your staff aren't happy and your patients aren't happy, there is no revenue.
Right.
So you have to focus on those two first. And, of course, the revenue helps to drive the rest. So I find them interchangeable. And so if you focus on revenue, you're going to miss out on the employees who impact the patients. And if you use all three as the main criteria for any organization, it's a perfect recipe. So when it comes to that culture, that's the side dish. Work culture can have a profound impact on several significant aspects of the employee experience, like individual, team morale, workplace engagement, and job satisfaction. And ultimately, when coworkers like and trust one another, organizations can reap the significant benefits in terms of the higher productivity and higher retention, while also creating a very agile workplace where teamwork, creativity, and innovation can flourish.
Love that. How do problems get solved inside your organization, and when do you get involved?
Yeah, I have a Lean Six Sigma black belt in
Hmm.
healthcare principles, as well as I'm a champion. So, like I said earlier, we use SWOT to bring teams together to work on what's working and not working, and if it impacts their threats due to other departments, we bring those departments together and fix it. And as you know, we it has that situation. It's like, well, what's not working? Well, another department, they send the patients over to us, and that causes more work, and then we get behind. So I call it cross bow shooting,
Mm.
and that doesn't promote team dynamics at all. It causes tension, it causes blame. And so when we hear these things, my team and I will bring those other departments together, maybe a few of them, to hear what they have to say. And it's really
Mm.
funny is that then they'll talk about another department, and it keeps going. And so what we do is I put together a compact where we bring them together and we talk about, what impacts their department, what hurts their department, and they share it with everyone else. And so what happens is the employees start to understand the whole patient and operational processes from every department. This avoids the pointing of fingers. It helps with their job. It would be more efficient, and it makes them happy, and the employees feel heard, respected, valued, and it creates that buy-in in the strategy direction and changing processes. And I like to tell them, and I hate when I hear this out there, if this is how it's always been, it is not a strategic plan. It's a
Mm.
strategic fail.
Mm. Love it. Many healthcare companies have had employee retention issues, particularly during COVID, and of course, the post-COVID era that we're now in. What do you guys do that's different that keeps your employees satisfied and at the job?
Yeah, knock on wood, but since I've been here, retention is at an all-time high, about
Mm.
92%, and we have over 400 employees. So the employees who usually have left were either termed for poor performance, they've gone to school, who have come back, I might add, in a new role, or their spouse usually relocates out of the state. And we're really proud of this. Employee turnover is unavoidable and mostly reality in business, as we know. However, I took that as a challenge, and it comes back to the life lessons of listening. And with my HR team and my leadership team, we developed a very strong retention strategy centered around meaningful metrics, employee engagement, and rewarding results that lead to a more happier, productive employees. And it has a significant cost savings for the company.
Is employee training important? If so, what works and what doesn't work there?
Yeah, training is huge. In the past, when newer seasoned employees didn't live up to expectations, I always wondered what we did wrong. What did we do wrong? What is the problem? But over the years, I emphasized new hire or even seasoned employees develop a deeper understanding of their role, improving their performance and learning new skills. And we created a training development that's focused on supporting employees' future plans, allowing them to grow in their roles, plan for future, rather than focusing on their current job because they feel like they're stagnant. They feel like they can't go anywhere. And the beginning of the year, all departments get together for a review, lecture, and group training. It's an opportunity for team leads, supervisors, and managers to go over any changes in healthcare, any mandates, and it helps increase efficiencies, encourage innovation, and have that vital knowledge amongst the group. It keeps everyone engaged so they don't leave going, I'm not aware of this, or there's issues and concerns they weren't addressed. We make sure we address it.
Yeah. And Greg, what do you found to be the most impactful executive development activity, particularly for yourself, but also for your executive team?
Yeah, we obviously go to conferences. Those are the big things, things that are specific to our role. But we also come back and be champions. We kind of teach each other and share insights that we've learned. And of course, I'm members of many committees and forums out there that kind of keep me intact with what's going on with healthcare. Specifically, Becker's is one of the big ones where I kind of know everything that's going on from HR, IT, to CEOs to specific cardiology and ASCs.
Yeah. What do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in and hire at Citi?
Yeah, two things I look for actually: personality. Will they fit our culture?
Yeah.
As I can't change people's personalities, so if they've got it, they got it. I can train someone to do a skill. I mean, I can train someone to be a cardiologist for goodness sakes, but personalities who help maintain a positive culture, that's a win. And second is skill set. Hiring intelligently is one of the most direct ways to build a company's success. I look for the most capable candidates, people whose experience and brilliance may even exceed my own. I strive towards creating that team excellence, like I've talked about before. But no one sets out to hire a B and C players. But sometimes this is a result when ego gets in the way. But if we continue to do that in an organization, hiring B and C players, then the company's going to end up being a total failure, and it's going to be my failure. I'm going to take that
Mm.
responsibility. So I look to invest on employees who have that knowledge and the personality that's going to fit the culture.
What's your favorite interview question, Greg, to kind of get at that truth, particularly with regards to cultural fit?
That's a good one. I like to ask the question, what motivates you when there's a challenge in the workplace?
Yeah.
I like this question because it enables me to gather a second, more valuable piece of information about the applicant's attitude. It's considered the predictor, I think, of future job performance and success because I know candidates can practice how they're going to answer questions.
Mm.
So I'm sure to not ask leading questions. It's common sense that the more effective person is in facing a challenge, the better results they're going to be able to achieve. And you can't make up a scenario and not get an honest answer because a person cannot provide the details. And so if they can answer those questions and not look at it as their fault and not do anything about it, but feel like they were able to solve it, then I want them on my team.
Love that. Gregg, we're just about out of time, but we always have one last question we always ask our CEO guests, and that's, what kind of career and life advice would you give to someone who maybe has their eyes on the corner office of their own someday?
Ah, good question, Brant. There's so many out there, I tell you, so many things that I've learned, but there's a few that I like to share with my leadership when I'm mentoring them and training them. Is a few things. Is one, you got to be directional. You got to make sure that your changes drive your goals. You got to be transparent when appropriate, because there's uncertainty creates anxiety, and transparency helps sharpen your focus and be credible. You got to believe in your performance. You got to stop letting low performance slide. You got to stop, enticing coworkers to slack. You got to make sure that they understand that expectations are there. Don't let bad behavior slide. You got to be less business-like. I've been more casual in my career, where I've made more personal connections by rounding and being visible and asking for input when I'm not in a suit, because there's that separation, right? If I'm in a tie, they feel like, you're above me, Gregg. You're way above me, and I feel intimidated. And I try to be less intimidating, because that personal connection is going to go a long way. And being thankful, always saying thank you and put it in writing. Thank you notes are powerful. I will come after hours and I will put thank you notes on people's desks. I'll tell them to have a great day, and they come in, and I'll come back later and they still have their notes on their computer on their desk. It means a lot. And the last two things, be data metric driven. Data helps make decisions. It's accurate. If it's verified, it can't be denied. And lastly, learn to pivot. Learn to pivot on the fly. That's what makes a great leader, because you're going to be well rounded. You're going to know operations. You're going to know everything. And in the end, it doesn't have to dictate on who you become, but it's going to help you on achieving success.
Gregg Florentin is the Chief Executive Officer of TriCity Cardiology in Arizona. They're one of the largest established private cardiology physician groups in the state, with over 44 years of history and a very stable partner base. Gregg, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Absolutely, Brian. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.